Number 4, and the actual significant role in which standards and the ISO organisation can have in supporting its achievement throughout the world. I'd like to acknowledge Jing Lee, the Honourable Jing Lee, Mayor Michael Coxon, and thank you for bringing us together, as Jing said, to Norma Hennessy, to all of the guests and all of the leaders. I just want to reflect on a few things. The first thing I want to say is that for all of the challenges of our contemporary world, and I don't think we need to outline them in this week of all weeks. There are many, and we acknowledge that. Despite that, we are still, by the virtue of the fact that we are alive and sitting in this room, I would count us in the most fortunate 1%, or 0.1% of 1% of people who have ever lived in this world. Any country in the world, where would you rather be? Any time to have lived in the history of humanity, I don't think there are too many times where there has been a lower likelihood that you would be born into poverty, that you would experience hunger, that you would experience abuse, indeed, as a function of just going about our lives. We are fortunate, and I think that one of the big challenges we have in the world, especially related to the proliferation of mental health challenges, I think one of the things I always try and do is have a little gratitude for my circumstances. Life isn't always easy, but nor has it ever been. So for that position, one of the reasons I think why we have prosperity in many parts of the world, poverty is on the decline overall. It's thanks to the collective efforts of an enormous number of people, including particularly those who have worked strategically to ensure that collective effort can achieve significant results. And to that end, we have work such as the Sustainable Development Goals. Sustainable Development Goal number 4 relates to education. It is to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and to promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. To everyone in the room, I imagine that sounds so expected as to almost be mundane, but the truth is that's an extraordinarily radical proposition. Think of the entire course of thousands, tens of thousands of years of human history. And anyone in those experiences, imagine them growing up in a world where you would expect the inclusive and equitable quality education and lifelong learning opportunities. This is something that's available to us and to a very, very small proportion of people who have ever lived. And unfortunately, there are many people in the world for whom that is not an expectation now as well. Here in South Australia, it may be, but throughout history, education, the idea of a formalised education that would be available to all in any community in every country is a very, very recent proposition. Throughout most of history, education has been about skills transfer in a particular area, the apprenticed labourer, the person who is going to experience in their life maybe one job, one option that they're born into, and they're given the skills that they need to do that. Education has largely been beyond that, mostly about ensuring that religious religious understanding is able to be transferred to generation on generation. And to that extent, there's been some development of literacy that has been available, but in very small numbers, unless people are born into wealth. Think of the civilizations around the world, and it varies from civilization to civilization. But take the Greek and Roman world, for example. We're very excited at the moment because, I don't know if you know this, but Herculaneum, one of the towns that was covered alongside Pompeii by the explosion of Mount Vesuvius in AD 80. In Herculaneum, they discovered a library with hundreds and hundreds of scrolls 20 or 30 years ago that were sort of carbonized with the eruption of the volcano. And these scrolls could contain unknown works by Plato or Aristotle, or the great playwrights of Greek and Roman civilization, or the philosophical treatises. We don't know what's in them, but laser technology has uncovered for the first time, just in the last couple of days, the opportunity. They have been, X-ray technology rather, they've read the first word of one of these. And this technology is developing. We're hoping we'll discover many new things from that. So we think of the Greek and Roman world as a place of great development and philosophical understanding and literacy. But at their peaks, the Greek and Roman world saw no more than 10 to 15% of their populations able to read and write. And for most of human civilization, most of history, it's been far less than that. In 1960, it was estimated that 36% of people in the world had no formal education. More than 1 in 3 people in the world had no formal education as recently as 1960, when some people in the room were alive. I wasn't, but some were. 2000, that had come down to 25%. 1 in 4 people in the world with no formal education. And formal education doesn't necessarily mean 12 years of experience of literacy, numeracy, and then a broad curriculum. No, I'm not talking about any access to education. To be able to read and write. We have higher expectations than that. We want our young people, certainly in South Australia, I used to say this all the time when I was a minister, our expectation is that every child in every classroom, in every town or suburb or city or pastoralist land in South Australia, every single one will be given the opportunity to thrive, given every opportunity to achieve their potential in life. That's our goal. And the idea of reading and writing is a very important first start. So, 1 in 4 people in the year 2000 given an opportunity to be educated, and it's been growing. The Sustainable Development Goal expectation is that in the following 30 years, there will be more formal education, more humans given formal education in 30 years than in the whole of human history prior to that. Think about that in a second. What an extraordinary expansion and opportunity that is. And here's where we come back to ISO and the Sustainable Development Goals and the value standards. In Australia, we have what's called the Alice Springs Mabantu Education Declaration. It was a document that I and the other education ministers signed in 2020, which highlighted our expectations of what the Australian education system would deliver. It's very much aligned with the Sustainable Development Goal. We say, Goal 1, the Australian education system promotes excellence and equity. And Goal 2, all young Australians become confident and creative individuals, successful lifelong learners, active and informed members of the community. Achieving those education goals is the responsibility of Australian governments, the Australian community in partnership with young Australians, their families and carers in the broader community. We set these strategic goals in action because they are an expectation of what our systems, our state, our country and our schools will deliver. And now, as we seek to have that education available to more people in 30 years than the history of the world has provided before, that means new education systems, new education offerings being developed and realised in countries, in states, in provinces where there has been very little or nothing before. And so having an education standard such as ISO 21001, which provides a framework for people developing new work, the impact of something like that cannot be understated. I'm going to finish briefly just by talking about the principles that the ISO has developed for 21001 for education. For the first time, the focus on learners and other beneficiaries, visionary leadership, engagement of people, process approach, continual improvement, evidence-based decisions, relationship management, social responsibility, accessibility and equity, ethical conduct, and data security and protection. I'm sure you would all agree that each of those would be understood to be critically important in an effective education system. And for an education system growing rapidly, ensuring that all of those are in place. So a framework that has been thought through, provided input by education experts from around the world. You can imagine how important that is going to be in impacting and bettering our community in the years ahead. There is going to be access to knowledge and access to skills in the world in the years ahead that is a result of broader access to education than has ever been before. And so I remain, despite all the challenges that we see in the world, I remain incredibly optimistic for our future. I think our state, our country and our world will be better in the years ahead than we found it as we were growing up. Thank you for being so patient.